Let's move to the next part. If we fully understand what the issue task is, let's move to the argument task. You are required to write a response in which you discuss what specific evidence is needed to evaluate the argument and explain how the evidence would weaken or strengthen the argument. Now, looking at this, I mentioned earlier that you are required to critique an argument. Now, what we have on the screen, as you can see, are the tasks and not the arguments. These are the tasks that you're given. Again, you can take out some time, pause the video, look through each of them, because it's not limited to this, but this is basically what you would find in a general argument task prompt. All right, so you have that A, B, C, and D, of course, a couple of others, but that's up to you. You can find out more on the in the official guide. All right, so hope you have your official guide, because the official guide is all you need to show you or put you in the right frame. Okay, so what are the essay tips? Look at that word again. Understand. Yeah, you see that again? Make sure you understand the argument and recognize the main claim. Understand the argument and recognize the main claim. I told you, an argument is a body of a claim backed up by evidence, opinion, facts, premises. So you must be able to recognize the main claim of the argument. You need to recognize the main claim of the argument, because as you would see in the next slide, the main claim is all that is required, to start up the essay. Without the main claim, if you pick up the wrong claim or the wrong sentence as your main claim, then you would have written off, and really we don't want to do that. So you have to be able to recognize the main claim. Now, for other classes on your argument structure passages, it will be explained to you in detail how to find the conclusion, the premise, the assumptions, the background, the counter premise if there is one. But yeah, that's up to you, all right, to watch out for the video on argument structure passages, because that's going to explain this in detail. But for this, we're going straight to the essay. All right. Number two, deconstruct the argument for all the building blocks as used by the author. Don't make any corrections in your head. Most times you read something and you want to correct it in your head. And when you do that, you lose sight of what the essay or the argument is really saying. Don't try to correct it in your head. Take it as is. Take it as it is. Okay? So number three, every argument is set up with a couple of flaws. Now, those flaws are deliberately put there for the purpose of what? Analysis. You should know the flaws to look out for. All right? These arguments are specifically written deliberately with certain flaws that you need to find out. So we'll talk about the flaws in the next slide. Number four, don't expect to take sides. Discuss your opinion or delve into the subject matter. No, please don't do that. All right, the matter is there. All you have to do is what? Be concerned with the reasoning behind the argument's main claim. Number five, keep your response as precise as possible. And number six, stick to the structure as given in the panels. All right, now flaws to look out for. I'm going to be very brief with this, so you might need to rush it up. If you don't understand, you can rewind and listen again. All right, so first, unjustified assumptions. Now the author might make some statements based on his view. For example, John reads very hard, so he'll pass the GRE. John reads very hard, so he'll pass the GRE. Now, the assumption there is that anyone who reads very hard will pass. So, if John reads very hard, he'll pass the GRE. But we did mention that anyone who reads very hard will pass. It wasn't mentioned. So that had to be true in the mind of the author. So an assumption is that statement, all right, that opinion that rests in the mind of the author of the argument, even without stating it. It must be true for the premise to agree with the conclusion or support that conclusion. So if that assumption is not justified, if it's not accounted for within the body of the argument, then we call that an unjustified assumption. And you'd have a lot of that in your essays. Number two, we have vague terms. Now, let's go back to what we just said. John reads very hard, so he'll pass the GRE. Of course, the question you ask is, what does it mean to read very hard? Think about it. There is no definition to reading very hard. Is it the number of books that you read? The hours you spend? The things you have to do in order to read? So it's not clear what the extent of reading will be defined as reading very hard. Again, pass the GRE. Now, pass the GRE is also not clear because somebody with a 300 might feel he didn't do well because his target is 310. Someone whose target is 300 gets a 300 and is passed. So it is not clear what passed means. Okay, so that's vague. So you have to look out for terms that are vague. That is the extent to which they are true. We don't know. So those are vague terms and they need to be clarified. All right. Next, sample is not representative. In this case, if looking at maybe a research or a survey taken and you feel that the respondents or the sample size of this survey may not be representative to come up with that conclusion. So you say the sample is not representative. Long term versus short term. Yeah, long term versus short term is just like saying if something happens within a short term doesn't necessarily mean that it will keep happening over the long term. So if you are taking a decision based on what you notice for a space of 2 weeks, and then you want to take a decision that affects 10 years, of course that it might be true, but there is no surety that that will be, all the factors will remain the same within 2 weeks and 10 years. Okay, so long term versus short term gives you a flaw that you need to pay attention to. Predicting the future, somewhat like the long term versus short term. Just looking at what you have now and predicting how it's going to be in the future, because you really can't predict. So any argument that has a prediction based on the factors that are present at a particular time is, of course, going to be a flaw. Again, correlation does not imply causation. Now, correlation does not imply causation is a special type of flaw because it involves two events happening at the same time. A change in one will not necessarily lead to a change in the other. So if for example both two people are running their businesses and one of them goes into advertising and the other doesn't, all right, maybe the one that goes into advertising now begins to get more customers and the other one loses customers. Now, yeah, that could be the reason, but it doesn't always mean that. There could be some other reason why this A gains and B loses. So correlation does not always imply causation. Then we have mathematical confusions, of course. For that, you cannot use percentages where you need to put amounts. For example, if two people make donations based on how much they have in their bank accounts, one person gives 50% of his entire savings and the other gives 10%. The one that gives 50% has not necessarily given more because it depends on how much they have in their bank accounts. So percentages should not be mistaken for amounts. All right, so watch out for percentages in your arguments. Then you have skill and will. Now this skill and will is a special kind of flaw that comes only when you have a proposed cause of action. For example, you're telling somebody that based on the information you have, the person should put in money into a project. And the question you should ask is that money available? And is there enough motivation to do that? Okay, so the skill part is the ability to carry out the proposal or the proposed course of action, and will is the motivation to actually do it. Is there a reason? Is there something that's going to push me to do it? So that comes when there is a proposed course of action. Then you have faulty comparisons. Of course, if you're going to compare an FMCG with a manufacturing company, and you want to say that the what applies in the FMCG and the manufacturing company would be the same, that might just be wrong. A printing press and a dairy company may not have the same mechanisms working for them as regards advertising. Okay, so it doesn't always work. So if you're trying to compare two things, you need to be sure that they're identical enough to allow for that kind of comparisons. Okay, so these are flaws. Of course, you have others. Yeah, you could have alternative cause. All right, alternative cause. You could have some others just like that. No sample, no control group. There are so many. All right, but these are basic flaws that you would find in most of your arguments that you'd find. All right, so you can still do some research into some other flaws, but for these, you'd surely find this in your arguments. Okay, so having said this, you can pause the video, go back and listen to my explanations one after the other, so you can take down notes. Very importantly, you need to take down notes, because what you write, you do not forget. Someone would say a short pencil is better than a long memory. So please do not rely on your memory. There's so much information that's coming out to you, so you can hold everything, or you shouldn't try to hold everything. You might be able to, but don't try to do it. It helps to take it down. So please pause the video, rewind, write down all you need to write, and make sure you get every single fact together. All right, so we have all our information channels, all right, on our uh, various social media platforms. You can send in questions, anything you don't understand. Of course, send us messages, and we would always respond to you. We're always there for you. All right, so let's keep. What's the structure of an argument essay? Yes, same convention. You see the goal for the introduction. First, you restate the claim. Now, you see why I said you need to know what the conclusion of the argument is. So you have to restate it. Just imagine you restating something that is not the conclusion of the argument, then you would have just messed up the whole essay. Okay. So please make sure that you understand how to find the conclusion of the argument. Next, connect the author's main claim with his premise. Now, what's the basis of that claim? What the author's considerations, in the direction of that claim? This is what you're gonna put down. Then you state clearly the flaws of the argument. Mind you, the flaws, all right, of the argument will be the points that you're going to pick on in order to find out how weak the argument is. So you're going to be stating the weaknesses to the support um, of the claim. So the body paragraph, just like what we had before, introduce the flaw, state a scenario that proves the effect of the flaw to the argument, present an example. Of course, examples key in building up your argument or in building up your essay based on what the flaw that you have. You need to present an example, paint a picture, present your case. Then attempt to remove the effect of the flaw or repair. Now that's important because you want to let us know what the writer omits. For example, if the writer had taken into consideration this factor and that factor, or this evidence and this evidence, it would have made the argument more believable, right? more convincing, more robust. All right. So you're just not trying to change it, but you're just saying what could have been considered to make the argument more convincing. And that's just it. It's as very simple. Conclusion: rephrase your thesis as in the introduction and summarize the repairs made to the effect of the flaws in the author's claim or on the author's claim. So very important. Remember, remember that you have to remove the effects of the flaw. Very important that you do that. You have to do that. Very important. Okay, so you're letting us know what the author should have considered in order to make his argument more robust. Okay, thank you very much. So let's go to the next. Yes, yes. We have a sample argument. Now, our arguments come from the ETS website. The link is over there, so you can always copy it and go check it out. But here we have an argument. Of course, you're looking at this argument, and it tells us about research work done 20 years ago by a doctor, and another is doing it now, and is trying to refute or counter the the credibility or the accuracy of that research work. So you need to go through it, and then what do you pay attention to? Pay attention to what you have there in gold. Pay attention to that. You need to go through it yourself. Okay? Pay attention to what you have in gold, because it gives you an indication of what the main claim would be. All right, so when you know the main claim, you can be on your way to writing your essay. Of course, there are flaws everywhere. First, you can see it's the first one happened 20 years ago. All right, if you go through it, you can pause the video and go through it. And then somebody is coming 20 years after and expects to get the same results. The changes might have happened over 20 years, and all that. And then he said something about the research that was carried out, the interview centered method, as it's stated there, was not carried out on that village, but all villages around that village. So what if we do not have enough people, interviewed from the particular village in question? So these are flaws that you could bring out of the argument to build your essay. All right. So you have your essay response. Please pause the video and go through the response. Remember the color convention. The gold means what? Yeah, introduction. The red means the body, of course, another body paragraph, then a supporting body paragraph, and your introduction. So take out time to go through each of these and look at the video. Pause it as much as you want, but make sure you get everything. As I said before, juxtapose the patterns that are given here with the structure that is given to you, and then you should have enough to do what you need to do. All right, so that being said, it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. I hope you gained a lot from this video. Like I said, you need to listen to it over and over and over again, because all the things that have been mentioned are things you need to listen to and practice. It is pertinent at this point to note: one, the best way to learn to write is to write. You cannot learn how to write by just listening. You have to write, and you have to keep writing. You have to get your mind, your subconscious, to feel it, to come into that environment, because when that happens, it becomes easy for you to put out your points. Okay, so you have to practice, practice, write, write, and write some more. Again, your essay writing should be mechanical as well as organic. All right, so it should be something that comes naturally. It should flow from you, and that's where the practice comes in. It must be mechanical and as well as what? Organic. It should not be forced. You don't try to force out the point. So in order to make that happen, you need to practice, practice, and practice some more. All right, so next, you should develop your own template from the structure given previously. Like, I gave you a structure that's based on my work, all right, based on how I like to write my essays. That structure, all right, is something you can use as a template for yourself. Now, if you feel more comfortable writing in a certain way, still within the scope of that structure, you can develop your own template. What works for you is fine. We're trying to make it as organic as possible, so try as much as you know as you can to develop your own template so that every time you write, you're going to follow your template. That will work so much for you. Bottom line is practice, practice, practice. Mentioned it. You have to keep practicing. And then if you need um, any one of us to go through what you've done, please feel free. Get in touch with us. We have all that you need, the resources that you need. If you need additional resources, we have all of that. Just get across to us in any of our social media platforms. Our handles will be given to you. So you have all that you need. It's a wealth of resources for you. This is Examplanet, and I like to say thank you for watching.